You take me for a walk.
And welcome to this week's edition of Twin Peaks Unwrapped. I'm your host, Brian Kazaska.
I'm Ben Durant.
And I'm Joel Bocko, the guest host for this episode, right?
Yes.
You got it. Yeah,
All right.
yeah, for this show, we're going to do a special where we're kind of just talking about the killer and kind of looking back on the killer. And I thought it'd be so cool to have Joel on the show. And I didn't think we needed to have him as an interview. I think it would be great to have Joel for this show to be a third host. So thank you, Joel, for coming on.
Yeah, you're welcome. My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, and I wanted to give you some background, Joel, in case you haven't seen it yet. Brian, you should share. Who did you think the killer was? And then when you were wrong, talk about were you surprised to find out who the killer was?
Okay, so I thought, and probably like most people, they really played up Ben Horne, and I really thought it was Ben Horne. Just because the way they played him up and the way they were really focusing on him and the different things he was up to, I was like, it's Ben Horne. It's Ben Horne. And then when come to find out it was Leland/Bob being in Leland or whatever, I was like, no way. But then the mystery unravels the following two episodes with about the incest and the abusive relationship and all this other stuff that
it starts to make sense, maybe?
It all makes sense, and you really are left with almost a bigger mystery, because the bigger mystery is, well, who is Bob and why? Who is Bob really? Was Bob really part of Leland? Was Leland possessed, or was that just a bad, because he was weak, he was able to do bad things and just blame it on an invisible person called Bob? And
what do you think, Joel? What do you think about all this? I mean, I know we still have more information than he does, but
yeah, that's the tricky thing. I actually just coincidentally wrote a long email to the Sparkwood 21 podcast.
Yeah, great show, great podcast.
Diary of Laura Palmer. I sent a big email to them about the Leland Bob, mostly in response to some of their earlier podcasts. Now, the tricky thing is the mystery on the show is, of who killed Laura Palmer is at this point over. Without spoiling too much, I wouldn't say there's necessarily more information. I guess there is more information to come. There's more perspective to come. And a lot of my views on Leland Bob honestly changed when that came. So I will go back. I'll rewind a little bit in time. And this is hard to do because, unfortunately, unlike you guys, I didn't keep track of, or unlike Brian, I didn't take notes or keep track of my reflections. So I have to kind of go back and, what did I think when this happened? And kind of remember through the haze of time.
Yeah.
I believe at the time, my take was, and I feel like the show, at least the episode where Leland is caught and dies, kind of pushes you in this direction. My take was Bob is definitely a demon from the woods who basically took over Exorcist style. And was just kind of like a blank vessel at those times, and that's kind of what happened.
Yeah.
So that was kind of my take when I was where you are.
Yep. I mean, to go with that, Joel, I just said that on our last episode. We were talking about the duality, and if the show... the incest and this horrible thing that happened, to give it a spirit and give it a name and give it a different body, it softens the blow. So it's not like you're thinking this father did a horrible thing.
The evil that men do.
Yeah, he was possessed by something.
Exactly. And I think looking at it 20/20 hindsight and with other stuff that comes down the line, I kind of feel similarly, a little bit like it's a cop-out. Because I think at the time I was even a little. Well, I'll rewind a little. I'll give you my sort of quick version of the killer's reveal story. So basically, I got a little bit spoiled. I saw it in 2008. So the internet was well along at that point.
Yeah.
And the episode where Bob climbs over the couch to scare Maddie.
Right.
Yeah.
After I sent that disc back, I'm like, to watch that scene again. That was one of the greatest scenes in any movie or TV show. So I went on YouTube and I Googled it, and somehow, it came up, and I watched that scene, and at the end, you know how YouTube shows you other videos to watch?
Oh, yeah.
A video popped up, and it said, Bob kills Maddie. Like, oh shit!
Oh.
You can edit that out if you need to make it,
that's all right.
a free podcast. But I was like, oh, that. So it didn't say Leland. It just said Bob. So I knew Bob was going to kill Maddie, and the fact that he would, and that implied to me, okay, Bob is somehow the killer. Then, like there's probably more to it because he's still hunting for someone, but. Clearly, Bob's the guy who did it, and I think, like Brian said, it's like at the end of the premiere.
Yeah,
kind of think that
season
anyway.
2 premiere, right? Season 2 premiere, it ends with.
There's more to it. That's not it.
Yeah.
Then you kind of wonder what the rest is. So, I never bought the Ben thing. I don't think because they weren't talking about Bob. It was all about Ben Horn, and Bob wasn't like a part of it. So I'm like, this can't be like if Bob's going to kill Maddie, and if Bob killed Laura. There must be something more, and I couldn't quite. I think maybe in the back of my head it was like maybe Leland, because Maddie lives with Leland, and that would be the logical person. But I don't think I really quite got the fact that Bob was like possessing someone.
Yeah.
Like by that point, it's pretty clear he's some kind of spirit or malevolent force. But I think I was half expecting it to be like a disembodied, like he would. Like as if that scene happened in the living room.
Yeah.
But instead of it being Leland Bob, it would just be like Bob would like materialize and kill her or something. So I wasn't quite sure what to expect. And then when that happened, when Leland like looks in the mirror, you get that kind of gut punch of like, oh wow, they went there, and it's like really dark. And then the next couple episodes, I think, pull it back a little bit. They make it like, well, yes, it was Leland, but there's more to it. It wasn't, he wasn't in control of himself and all that. But when you watch the actual scene where he kills Maddie, I think the impression is more like kind of confusion and shock and horror and like very uneasy feeling, And then I think the couple episodes later when they catch Leland and he confesses as Bob, and then Bob leaves and he kind of confesses as Leland. At that point, it's almost like a little soothing. It's like, okay, good. This, we're back to the sort of the fun entertainment of Twin Peaks, and we're not getting too much into the like really dark psychological stuff of like what happened to Laura and was her dad really this evil person and all this stuff. So I think from that perspective of like the shock of it and kind of going for that ride, I kind of accepted that at that time. That makes sense.
And for you, Brian, I can see how you could see it being Ben. There were definitely clues. I mean, Audrey finding out information from One-Eyed Jacks, and then I don't know, the episode where Cooper finds the diary and says, "Friend of my father," and they're definitely sending the breadcrumbs to basically say it's Ben and stuff. So I could see that, and in the script, they putting Ben down as saying dialogue that really Leland is saying, and we know that the actor who plays Ben Horn actually did kill. I mean, he had to go through all the steps to kill Maddie as well. So I definitely can see how that's possible. I wrote down, so I have all these notes just on kind of looking back from the beginning and seeing.
I'm interested in this.
Are there enough breadcrumbs to say it could be Leland? So, I mean, just to start off in the pilot, we have Sarah Palmer. She calls Betty Briggs, and she's saying she's trying to look for Laura. And, she's thinking, maybe she's Laura's with Bobby. And then she says, wonder if she went out with Leland. He had an early meeting. And so they're rolling. We don't really have a strong alibi where Leland is.
Interesting.
And stuff. What do you think, Joel, about that? Like the fact that he has no alibi, and so right from the pilot, he could have, he may not even came home that night for all we know, because Sarah doesn't know about that. I mean,
this is going to be interesting because I'm going to talk about it without saying too much of things that come down the pike.
Yeah, right.
Too much. There's a little bit.
It's hard. Yeah.
It's fun. I like kind of walking the tightrope or whatever.
Right.
What can I say and what can't I say? Yeah, I agree. I think the funny thing is I saw a talk that Mark Frost did at USC on YouTube, actually. Maybe you can put the link in your show notes or something. But he says that they didn't know who killed Laura in the pilot, but they decided shortly after. And there's an interview he gives in 1990 where he says, we had to get to know the town and everybody in it before the killer revealed themselves to, like, he didn't say he or she.
Yeah.
He said it in some sort of neutral way before the killer was revealed or something like that. So it kind of, I think that terminology makes sense because It's like whether they knew it or not, Leland was always the killer. You know, that sounds kind of weird, but
yeah, it was almost like maybe they consciously didn't know he was the killer, but they kind of like kept on going in that direction. Yeah.
Exactly.
And then also in the pilot, Hawk and Leland are in Laura's room, and Hawk finds the diary, and Leland says, "Do you have to take that?" And of course, you're thinking as a father, you don't. That's very personal to my daughter. But in the same sense, if you're the killer, you could be afraid of any information that could get.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I don't know if I want. I mean, I could keep on going on, but I also don't want to derail our conversation. If you guys have other things you want to talk.
I think maybe we can discuss each one, but I'd love to hear all of them, you know? I mean, actually, the bedroom, the funny thing about that is Truman said there's like a moment where sitting on the couch and she hears this movement upstairs and she gets kind of terrified, Sarah Palmer.
That's right. Who's upstairs?
Yeah.
And he goes, "Your husband." And it's just this weird moment, and she's like pauses for a second, and then she's like relieved, but it's kind of ominous.
Yeah, right. It's kind of like. I'm
sorry.
sorry.
Go on.
Say that again, Joel. I'm sorry.
Oh no, keep going.
No, do you think? Well, we discussed that was Sarah drugged. You know, was Sarah drugged?
Or did she know what was going on in her own house?
I feel like she was drugged or something because she's always out of it and she doesn't know what's going on. She always seems like she's in the dark. So, like...
Suggest that with the reveal episode because she's crawling down the stairs and she passes out.
Yeah. I thought she got punched in the stomach or something.
That's what Brian said. He said, I think... So, you know, again, I'm moving on. Episode 2, and this, I think, comes from Video Watchdog number 2. You know, we have this whole rock-throwing technique, and, you know, Cooper is going to concentrate on the J's today. And, you know, what is the closest name to the name Leland? And I think the closest name is Leo. And so, and that's what breaks, the bottle breaks. I mean, maybe it's a stretch.
I never thought of that.
Yeah.
Wow.
I don't know if it's a stretch, but it's...
I just thought, okay, well, it's breaking because Leo was a bad guy and he hurt her, even though he didn't kill her. But no, I like your interpretation better.
It's pretty cool, right? I mean, yeah.
The universe is telling him you're almost there.
You're almost there, right?
You're getting warmer.
No, never mind.
And was Leo ever
the alphabet, but it isn't.
Was Leo ever close to Laura beyond selling her drugs?
Yeah, I mean, he was one of the people that she was with that night. I mean, remember he had a fight with Jacques. Yeah,
that's true. I guess was Leo ever close to Leland? No, remember how Ben was close to Leland and he gave out the bad.
You're still kind of unsure about this. It will come up again. I know.
Guy in the woods with the mask. You mean?
You know, I read something that. I'm sorry, Joel.
Are you asking if he was that guy in the woods?
I read something.
And Leo was doing the drug deal?
The guy in the woods with the mask was supposedly the killer.
So I think this is a good episode to talk about that now. I mean, yeah. Do you want me to go there, Joel, and get into the I mean, I can do it by episode and kind of...
Oh, well, you're on episode 2, so it's I guess that was the one where he did it, I think.
So no. Was that Leland in the mask?
Okay, no, well, we don't know about that mask, and I think when we originally did there, right, Joel? I mean, it's kind of a question mark.
Yeah, I don't think Frost has ever said. He did say that the guy who hits Jacoby is the killer.
That's who I'm talking about.
And that's
the guy in the mask.
If we want to go in chronological, what's that, Joel?
I was saying we don't know if the guy who stands in the woods. Remember, there's a guy standing in the woods with a mask.
Right. Bobby and Mike are hanging or are getting the football, and Leo is standing there, and there's like, who's with you? And we do see a guy in a mask in the tree, but near the in back of a tree. But we never learn about that. But I think you are talking about we're way up to episode 7 or something, 6 and 7. But I don't know if why don't we keep going and then I'll revisit.
Go back to episode 2 and we'll get to that because I wanted to hear your thoughts on episode 2.
Okay.
If you have more besides the rock throwing one, because I have one.
So in episode 2 is the episode, of course, with Cooper's dream, the red room, the little man dancing.
Yep.
This is the first time we see Leland dancing. and stuff in the
Wow.
same episode that we learn about the little man dancing. And this is the one where he says we have to dance with Sarah, and he has the picture of Laura, and it
Yeah.
smashes and blood on Leland's hand. I mean, the idea of you've got blood
Red.
on your hands.
Yeah,
The idea
blood.
of,
Oh,
if you're a
yes.
murderer, you've got blood on your hand, and then he
hands.
smears the blood all over Laura's picture. And we have to dance.
Wow,
We have to
yeah.
dance for Laura. And. Do you have anything to say about that, Joel? Before I continue,
Yeah, well, that's kind of in my head. I have a little theory, which I don't know if it's true, which is that Frost says not long after the pilot we figured out who the killer was, and I wonder if it was either while writing that episode, because that's the last one in the whole series that Lynch and Frost wrote together.
Yeah.
Wow.
Lynch did the story for episode 8, but that might just mean he suggested certain things, and Frost wrote it. But that's the last one where they both wrote it together. So I kind of wonder if when they were writing that scene, it was kind of like, okay, he's the guy. And then another part of me wonders, maybe it wasn't until they shot it, because supposedly the blood smearing was an accident.
I've heard that.
Leland or Ray Wise, I think actually Grace Zabriskie might have cut her hand, and
Yep.
he reached over and grabbed the blood from her hand and just was improvising and put it on the picture.
I think you're right, Joel.
So, yeah, so I thought, wouldn't that be wild? Because Ray Wise hated being the killer. He really didn't want to be.
Oh, yeah.
I thought, wouldn't that be wild if it's because of him that he was, like, they saw that and were like, well, now Leland has to be the killer, The only thing
Interesting.
with that is they shot that episode out of sequence. It was the second to last episode of the season that they shot.
That's right, because Lynch was busy with Wild at Heart. And
Yeah,
that's right. And
it was really late for them to decide the killer if that was
Wow.
they shot it. So I don't know about that. Maybe that's not true, but
that's interesting, though. Yeah, and talk about Ray Wise. I think he had a young family. I think he had, maybe a young child, and so I think he really didn't want to be the murderer and be connected like that. And I think he also liked being on the show, and he knew that if he was the killer, he wouldn't be on the show anymore. So I think he really dreaded the thought of being on that. So another thing related to the scene at the beginning of the scene with Leland before he says let's dance for Laura. He's snapping his fingers, and then he puts the record on. And then, and I'm just trying to connect this, that Cooper has his dream, and when Cooper wakes up, he's snapping his fingers. I don't know if there's a connection with the idea that Cooper seems like he's really into this music of the dancing, and he's like kind of like in sync. And to have Leland doing that too, I don't know. Maybe it's a reach, but
I just connected something. I mean, okay, Cooper wakes up snapping. Leland was snapping
at the record when he turns on the record.
Fast forward to episode 15. Leland's driving crazy on the road, and Cooper says about the driver's school.
Oh, yeah.
And he's whistling the song that Leland is singing.
Yeah, like he's in sync. He's a strong sender.
Yeah, he's a rock. Yeah.
connection for sure.
Yeah.
Wow.
He's
So
a
that's
strong.
cool.
He's a strong sender.
Strong sender.
Favorite quote.
Okay, so I mean, I don't know how. I'll share this. Episode 3. In episode 3, this is the funeral episode.
Yeah.
Some things I wanted to mention was that, like, in episode 1 script, Leland's having trouble making funeral arrangements, and Ben is assisting him and tells the funeral people on the phone that he will pick up the tab. And then when we jump to episode 3, in the morgue, Ben is basically saying, I've agreed to appear on his behalf, on Leland's behalf. I actually was wondering if Leland, I mean, this is a stretch because it's not there, but was Leland manipulating Ben even back then to the fact that, like, you take care of all this arrangement stuff and then I can pin it on you? I mean, this is a stretch, but it's still interesting to see Ben kind of handling a lot of this stuff for Leland.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Well, that's a good question, because I kind of take it, even if Leland was responsible for, like, it wasn't just Bob pulling his puppet strings or whatever, I always kind of take it that after he killed her, Leland, like, blanks out, like maybe he forces himself to forget or something.
Totally, yeah.
But it's interesting to wonder more what you're saying, if there's still a part of him, or even if it's the Bob part, that is saying, okay, do this now, set Ben up this way, and kind of manipulating things like that. That's kind of I never really thought, but he does set Ben up later because he takes So, like, it isn't
fur,
a
right?
chance that they're led to Ben. He leads them to Ben because he takes the white fox fur.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
to go way ahead. I'm jumping way ahead.
No. You got to connect the dots. So I think that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. And of course, the classic scene. We're at the funeral, and Leland jumps on the casket. Casket, which and it rises and falls, and to me,
comical.
It's comical, but gosh, it makes me think of incest in some ways. He's on top of the.
Yeah, that's a weird. It's a weird moment in the show. Like, it's bouncing up and down. Like, it's broken. It's such an odd thing to be happening. Like, yeah, it is weird.
Sarah says, "Don't ruin this too."
Yeah, why would she say that? What has he ruined in the past? I mean, right? I mean, that is
Very suggestive.
very suggestive.
Yeah.
And I think that was improv. I don't think it was originally in the script, or maybe I'm wrong. That
I looked it up, and I think it was because somebody I remember talking to, I think, Brad Dukes about that, because there was something in his book, anecdote from the director, where she said Ray Wise came up with this or something.
Yeah, that's what I think I read it. You're right.
It was script, I think.
Okay.
Which Harley Payton wrote. And Harley Payton, this is another thing we can get into, but there's a little, it's not totally clear to me who knew what when. During, I think, the USC talks, they make it like, oh, well, Bob and Harley knew as well, told their wives. I think Bob Engels says that, and we told our wives, so like 5 or 6 people knew in the first. I honestly don't believe that, and Bob Engels is kind of all over the map sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
Memories, like he'll say something in one interview and something totally different in the next.
Right.
So Jennifer Lynch says, this sounds closer to me, is like, they brought her in the room and they're like, this was in, I guess, July or August when they were planning the second season, and said, you're now one of 3 air-breathing mammals who knows who killed Laura Palmer.
Yeah.
When she was writing the diary. So I find it hard to believe, as much as they entrusted the other writers with stuff, I find it hard to believe that they knew, and I don't think they did either, because there's a quote from Harley Payton in Reflections where he flat out says he doesn't think they even had a killer in mind.
Yeah, so I think it was Lynch, Frost, and then whenever she had to write the book, that Jennifer Lynch was probably brought in, and that was it. I think you're right on that.
And then after that, they had to let Harley and Bob know, and they had to let Frost's brother know, because he wrote that episode where Leland is dancing and driving the car and all of that.
Well, the interesting in the script, we have Big Ed driving the car, and he looks in the mirror and sees Bob.
Yeah, that's so. I think I remember hearing that. That's so weird.
Isn't that crazy? I mean, I think it's just afraid for the script gets leaked and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But
I guess it's just like it's such an unconvincing. But I guess it's there's a lot of stuff like that. Like, for example, they made this big conceal of like shooting the scene with Ben Horn where he murders Maddie. But then a couple weeks later, they have to shoot the scene in the jail cell with Leland confessing, and it's like that was shot before the reveal episode aired, because they weren't, they were more than 2 weeks ahead of air date. So I always wonder, it's like they made all this effort, and yet even so, the closer they got to the air date, the greater the likelihood that multiple people knew,
Yeah, but even in that script, even in the script of the jail cell, Ben is still doing the lines of Leland in the jail cell. So at least on the script, they were trying to keep it as long as possible. Yeah.
I don't think they shot that scene with Ben as well.
No, I don't think so. No, definitely not.
No.
Maddie's murder scene.
No, yeah, you're right. So, I mean, we probably don't have too much more on episode 3, but there is at the end of that episode where Cooper and Hawk are talking about a spirit, and then Leland is dancing and stuff, and he wants to dance with people. So it seems like almost every episode we have this dancing,
crying and dancing.
But now we can look back and say it's almost connected to the little man from another place where he dances and stuff. So that if we it's all about dream logic or dream code. If we could break the code, we would have known all along that Leland was basically telling us that he was the killer, or that he was somehow related to this mystery.
And do you think he was crying because he knew it was him, but Bob, it was really trying to take hold of him? And I think for me, the moment his hair turned white, that's when Bob was like full swing in him. I felt that's when he became, because he wasn't crying anymore.
Yeah,
he was
very
dancing
happy.
happy. So it was almost like he's gone insane.
Yeah, Joel, what do you make of the white hair? Like, why do you what do you think that was about?
I've never really figured out why. It just works on a gut level. Like, oh yeah, Leland's hair turned white somehow.
It's Twin Peaks. Crazy stuff happens.
Yeah.
But I don't quite know why it happened.
No, it's too funny. Episode 4, at the Palmer house, Sarah is talking to Andy and Truman, mostly Truman, and Andy I think is taking notes or sketching and talking about the Bob vision. And he says, "Oh, his face! My God, his face!" And then all of a sudden, who comes in? Leland, mocking her and basically saying, "Oh, she's had 2 visions."
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
To me, it's kind of like, is that Bob coming out being like, "We can't take this stuff serious that she's talking about"?
I feel like it is.
It's like,
well, Leland might know. Leland knows in the end that that Bob can take over his body, and he's done horrible things.
Yeah.
So maybe it could have been Leland, or it could have been Bob, or
I mean,
who knows,
you
right?
You could look at it as either Leland doesn't believe his wife when it comes to this supernatural world, or we could take it as if he is Bob, he doesn't want to take this. He doesn't want them to get closer to solving this mystery, and he's saying, why are we wasting our time on visions?
Yeah.
Anything, Joel? Anything you want? Or you want to go to episode 5?
Yeah, no, you can keep going.
Okay. Let's see. Episode 5, Great Northern. Jerry's talking to the Icelanders, and all of a sudden music starts, which I think it might have been Audrey sabotaging them. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
And then Leland begins to cry and dance. And the interesting thing I find is when I remember watching this, he crouches down, almost as though he's small, or he kind of crouches and gets into a ball, and then all of a sudden he extends himself and starts dancing by himself. He has the whole stage to himself, and that to me really makes me think of the little man from another place. That he's tiny. He's
Yep, and then he gets bigger like the giant.
Yeah. So I mean, it's more dancing. I mean, I guess you could talk a lot about dancing, but. Episode 6, Maddie sneaks out of the Palmer house. This one, I think people who actually saw the show when it aired, or even people who have seen it for the first time, a lot of people think maybe this is one of those times where they question whether it could be Leland. Maddie sneaks out of the Palmer house, and then Leland is sitting in the dark, and he's got this kind of menacing. I mean, part of me, when we talked about it, I thought, well, maybe he's crying, and he's very menacing. And what did you think of that scene? Does that ever?
I've heard a couple intro casts, and maybe even 3, where the new person, that's the episode where for the first time they go, maybe, in fact, this might have been one of them. I don't remember if Brian picked up on that.
I don't know. Yeah.
I don't remember.
I don't think you did, but I've heard it too. Yeah.
I can look at my notes.
It's like, wait a second, because they make him look so creepy. And the funny thing about that is the episode was written by Peyton. It was directed by Cal and Caleb Deschanel. Ray Wise didn't know. So nobody involved in that decision of executing that. Maybe maybe Frost was like, hey, could you guys have a scene? But I kind of doubt, nobody involved in the execution that actually knew Leland was the killer, and yet it was like they were picking up the vibes or something. It's just funny how that works.
It is something. And we're getting closer to talking about the ski mask and killing. I'm not killing. Beating up Jacoby. But it definitely, you could see in your own mind. I think you could see Leland kind of being in the dark, and then Maddie leaving the house, and maybe him. We didn't see it, but maybe then he gets up and follows her. I mean, because if he followed her and he had a mask, he would be right where Dr. Jacoby would be and stuff.
That would make sense.
All right, episode 7.
What happened?
Yeah. Episode 7. In the hospital, Leland smothers Jacques Renault with a pillow, and I mean, so I think Joel, we can't get into it too much, but in a way, it seems like he's covering his tracks, and I think in future stuff that happens, maybe Jacques knows more information and stuff, and in a way, he's kind of covering. I mean, we know that Leland is now the third man. And so you don't understand all the details of what happened to Laura and that night. Yeah. But we know that Jacques and Leo and Laura were together and Renette, and somehow Leland gets involved with this as well. So in some ways, I feel like this whole smothering of Jacques could also be covering his tracks too.
That is true. That is definitely that makes sense to me now.
Right. I think there's a lot of talk about when Leland and Bob diverged, and without getting too much into later revelations or insight. I think, to me, just dramatically, what's most interesting is to figure out the ways they kind of coincide. I like that because it's like you have, on the one hand, a part of Leland that, loves his daughter and grieves for her, and it's like, if he is having repressed memory, is like, this guy did it, I'm going to kill him. Then you also have the part of Leland that knows, I did this and wants to cover the tracks, and, you have the Bob wanting to sort of lead them astray. So you kind of have, I think the most interesting thing to me is whenever Twin Peaks kind of suggests that the spirit and the human worlds kind of coincide in a way, like the psychology and the mythology go hand in glove.
Yeah.
And sometimes it does that, and sometimes it kind of bleeds away from that. So, but it's always kind of interesting to piece that together.
Definitely.
And that's very Lynchian because he always does that. He does Mulholland Drive and Lost Highway and all that. There's always there's these kind of, you could call them supernatural or like uncanny, unexplainable things happening, but yet they kind of resonate on a psychological level. It's like, well, yeah, this actually makes sense with, human behavior and how humans think and act, even in a realistic way, even though they're presenting it in this sort of, dreamlike way.
Yeah, and what I like about that too is that Lynch definitely opens it up for interpretation. I mean, I think that's what I love too. That he always leaves it open. That I have a theory about Lost Highway, and I think I know it, but you talk to somebody else who watched it and they saw it in a whole different way. And I think that's, to me, what's most beautiful about his work is that you can appreciate his stuff and you have to decide what it is to you, it means to you and stuff. So episode 8.
Engage with it.
Yeah. Episode 8, we already talked a little bit about how Leland's singing and dancing and his hair is white and when he sees Sarah and Maddie. And I think I wrote when after Jacques' death, it seems like his hair is white. But whether that
hair's white. Oh, it also reminds me of the White Horse.
Yeah,
because the horse is white.
There's a lot of white things. There's talk about white house. There's talk about white horses. There's definitely. There's more. There's even more talk about white when we get down as the series continues and stuff. But yeah. So Cooper and Truman talk to Dr. Jacoby in the hospital. Cooper mentions he was there when Jacques was murdered, and then so they're trying to get out. It's like, you were there. I know you were kind of messed up and stuff, but can you get any more information from you? And then Dr. Jacoby, I think you missed this, possibly, and I wanted to wait for this episode to talk to you about it, Brian. But Dr. Jacoby says there was a smell like oil, scorched engine oil, and so I guess I'm gonna jump ahead and I want to connect it all together so that we're all on the same page. So that's episode 8, and then episode 10. Is that the right? I just want to do.
Is it like being put in a trunk? You smell oil from a car.
I'll get there. I'll get you there. Episode 10, I'll probably jump back, but episode 10, Cooper hypnotizes Dr. Jacoby, and then as Cooper is the one that asked, do you remember smelling this engine oil in the hospital? And Dr. Jacoby says he remembers smelling engine oil at the park. And Cooper doesn't get it, and he basically says, let's get back to the hospital. But
that's connecting that Leland was at the park that knocked him out, and at the hospital that killed Jacques.
Yes, and the last one I'll do, and then we can talk about it, is episode 14 when Maddie is killed. When she comes down the stairs, she smells something. She says, "Hey, I'm smelling something burning."
Oh yeah.
And that's so. It would be. I think one interpretation is when Bob is around, and maybe he's about to kill or something, that he has this scent of engine oil. All right, I should let Joel talk here, but I wanted to put all that together. So
in the gum.
That's a great point, and it ties in with fire too. Those.
Yeah.
Me.
Oh
and,
yeah.
Laura says to James, or James says that Laura said to him, "You want to play with fire, little boy," which is also what Bob said to Leland. He remembers.
Yeah, when he was a boy.
Or whoever. There was a man at the Robertsons' house who said, "You want to play with fire," and he lights the match and flicks it. And
that's
then the log lady says, "Fire is the devil." What does she say?
Yeah, and when they visit her,
the devil hiding like a coward in the smoke.
Yeah.
So you have this association, and then when Leland dies, or when Bob leaves Leland, he smashes his head on the door. it's because the water goes on the sprinkler, so you could say it's going on and putting out the fire.
Oh, I like that. I never thought of that. That's really cool.
Another double meaning.
Like the only way to justify that stupid scene with Dick Tremaine lighting a cigarette.
In front of a pregnant lady, nonetheless.
Yeah.
And I always kind of thought of fire as the devil, like as that we have these demons in hell and something like that. But so I've been holding off on this, but you've basically been saying, oh, I heard that the person who jumped Jacoby is the killer, and this kind of proves it in the sense that we know the scorch engine oil was at the park, and we know scorch engine oil was at the hospital when Leland murdered.
So it was Leland.
I think if
that's one of the controversial things that I've read is people say that Jacoby clarifies it and goes, oh, no, it wasn't at the hospital, it was at the park. But I'm not 100% sure.
Well, I think what happens is he says he's talking about the park, and Cooper is the one that tries to lead him back to the hospital. Like, I think Cooper is the one that misses the reading, misses that Jacoby is basically saying it happened at the park as well. And I think it's Cooper who led him back to the hospital. Said no, let's talk about the hospital. So I think if we went back to that, but
I'm just wondering if he did, because that also would suggest Bob was there when Jacques was killed.
Yeah, and it's funny because we always would think
puts it in a new light, like you were.
Yeah, because we would think that Leland was the one that is grief of his daughter.
Mm.
Yeah, exactly. Like the most logical or straightforward read is that was totally Leland doing that. He was in grief, blah blah blah. And if Jacoby only smelt the engine oil at the park, then that would kind of confirm that.
Right.
But if he smelled it at the hospital too, that kind of throws it in a new light, like you were saying, that either Bob is always there with Leland, or that Bob was there in that moment for a specific reason because he was playing a witness or not a witness, but he was Drax. But yeah, that is interesting.
Yeah, and I mean, in the future we have there's more talk about Jacques, and he might have more information about Leland, and that's why I don't want to get into it too much. But
Jacques comes back from the dead?
Maybe.
No.
All right, never mind. We'll get into that another time.
Oh, no.
We'll get into that another time. What else? Oh, the other thing is.
Hey, wait, what was that? What just happened?
We're talking about in the future. Maybe there might be a future scene where Jacques somehow comes back and talks about Leland, but I don't want to spoil anything too much for.
I think I said, did Jacques come back from the dead?
Maybe it's flashbacks. Like they do flashbacks.
All right.
Anyways,
Jacques' cousin.
This is fun because you still seem to have kept free of too many spoilers.
I know. I can't believe it. I still can't.
Don't go on Twin Peaks sites because I see them put up one of the last images from the show.
I don't.
Tumblr, I see it all the time. On Twitter, it's like, hey, look at this great shot. And it's like, that is a great shot, but if you've never seen the show, it's kind of spoiler,
I'm still amazed that Brian was able to make it through the through the mystery and not know who killed Laura Palmer.
But there's more, you don't want to be spoiled on, so.
So the only other thing I want to say about Leland killing Jacques was I love that. I mean, after rewatching it several times, you have the fire alarm go off, and then all of a sudden the fire alarm stops, and he kind of like shakes, and it would look like he's like realizing, oh, I got to get out of here. Mm-hmm. But I sometimes watch that and think, is that when all of a sudden Leland wakes up, or like could Bob be killing Jacques, and then all of a sudden the alarm goes off and Leland's back, and he's like, I got to get out of here and stuff. I don't know.
And he knows he does horrible things, so.
He doesn't know. Leland is, he says that when he's dying that he doesn't always remember what happened.
But he knows he's done. He's made him do horrible things. He says that.
Only after he's dead.
Let's give him an out there because it says, Bob says, I'm going to leave and pull the ripcord, and then he everything.
Right.
But theoretically just be that he's remembering it now, but he didn't.
Fair enough. Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
It's kind of they muddy the waters a lot in that episode. It's kind of interesting. And yet they still leave a lot of doors open, too. It's an odd episode, but we'll get to that.
And then in episode 8 in the Hayward house, Leland sings "Get Happy," and he starts ramping it up and gets a little crazy and snapping. Yeah. He's snapping and singing faster and get ready for the Judgment Day. And he collapses and he's like, "I feel happy."
Is that like sort of like foreshadowing him falling in the cell?
I don't know if it's
and he feels happy because he the truth is out and he can be happy now.
I don't know if that's it, but it's just weird in some way that he's kind of like losing control a little bit. And I like the whole idea of the Judgment Day is Bob.
But like the Judgment Day is him dying, he's collapsed.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Wait, the lyrics of the song actually they're not just random.
No, right.
Yeah,
they
yeah.
have meaning, and this will come up again when we get to a future episode when I get there. That he sings things, and sometimes he's singing things that are very much seem related. Once you've seen the show, you say, "Wow, that really could talk about the whole Bob stuff that's going on." But
yeah, I definitely connect the dots now.
Episode 9, Leland recognizes the drawing of Bob in Ben Horn's office. I mean, I'll open it there, and if you guys have anything to say about that, I'll go into more detail if you want.
Anything, Joel?
That, to me, episode 9, actually not 9 because you don't know what he's going to do with that information,
right.
But 10, when he goes to the police station and he tells them the whole story about Bob, almost more than episode 16, that's the episode that seems to most strongly suggest Leland doesn't know about Bob and also doesn't know that he killed his daughter.
Yeah.
Yep.
That because it's such a weird. Why would somebody who killed their daughter go to the police station and be like,
basically blame himself in some ways, or at least
even if he didn't know about Bob, but he knew he killed Laura and he knew that this man was wanted in connection with his daughter's death. Unless he thought he could pass it off on him. I mean, if you want to get really deep into it, we could maybe. I'm making this up as I go along, so maybe it's not going to make sense when I finish it. But you could argue, I guess, what if he sees the picture of Bob and he recognizes him, and he thinks if he gives them information that'll lead them to Bob, and then Bob will be this because he thinks Bob's a real person. Bob will be captured, and that'll be the guy they pin my daughter's death on, even though I did it, because he doesn't know that Bob actually. In other words,
I like that.
Laura, but he doesn't know about Bob. I don't know if I buy that, but
right.
I'm throwing it out there.
Well, I mean, if you're going in this direction, or even another way, what if we believe Bob? There is a Bob who's taken over Leland, and sometimes Leland can wake up. And what if he was able to? What if just seeing that picture of him woke him up and says, "I might not be here that long before Bob takes over again," and in a way, I can basically tell them what I know, and that before Bob takes over again, and maybe
almost the opposite, like not knowing he killed Laura, but knowing, or not having killed Laura herself, but knowing about Bob. So literally, that could be read in almost completely opposite ways.
That's funny.
I guess it's more ambiguous, but it does push you in the direction of thinking. He doesn't know Bob, and he doesn't know that he killed his daughter.
Yeah, and
just like reporting something he vaguely remembers.
Also, he mentions
there's precedent for that. Has Brian seen Lost Highway?
I don't think
I saw Lost Highway when I was in high school. I'm gonna rewatch it because I'm sure we're gonna end up doing it eventually.
Well, without giving away too much, there's a lot of stuff in that movie about people sort of dissociating and coming up with other identities and genuinely almost making themselves forget stuff. So there's and for that idea. Well, not precedent because it came afterwards, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. And real quick, I got Lost Highway is my favorite Lynch film. Do you know how maybe some of the origin of that story came about? David Lynch was obsessed with the O.J. case at the time,
really?
Like
that makes
the
total
Bronco
sense.
chase, and about the whole storyline. And when we get into the movie, I'd love to talk more about it. But knowing the O.J. case and the events that happened in that, and then putting it onto the movie, you can say, I can see the parallels. I can see how he could, rip from the headlines basically and put that into the movie.
Yeah, I can't wait to rewatch it.
It's funny because O.J. came after Firewalk with me, but it's almost like following because it's like O.J.'s whole thing was like, oh, I didn't do it, and then going off. And I think Lynch has a quote. He's like, I saw him smiling and playing golf, and I was like, how can you do that after they killed their wife? And it's like, kind of thinking about that. And that's kind of that's literally what we see in some of the episodes of Twin Peaks where Leland's playing golf.
Yeah, isn't that funny?
Yep.
Year to year. So it's almost like, and a lot of people read it this way, where it's like, in the world, Bob is real, but in the metaphorical sense, what the sort of like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde or whatever, actually telling us psychologically is there's a part of the brain that we just sort of repress the ugly truths and keep them hidden, and that's sort of Twin Peaks, this pretty happy surface with the dark undertones and everything.
Yeah,
same thing. But the funny thing with Twin Peaks and we'll see some more later on in Twin Peaks. It's the moment when she starts to take it being like real in world, but true metaphorically, and actually starts to make the characters within the work conscious or struggling with the evil they're doing. Kind of Lynch, with Twin Peaks, I think is where he starts to consider making the good and evil more intertwined and not so easily separated as they were in his earlier films.
Yeah. I wanted to say also, to go back to when Leland goes to the police station, this is where it threw me for a loop. And I on the show I talked about this to Ben, was why would Leland see someone that looked that way when he was a kid? And we were joking around. Oh, did Bob have a kid, and like the kid looked like him, or did he? And to me, it was changing. I'm like, there was a spirit or a ghost. I don't know if you heard. I started talking about, was this family being haunted by a spirit or a ghost that only the females were seeing? Because at that point, only Laura and Maddie had seen it. Cooper had seen something.
Cooper saw him in his dream.
But Cooper is a strong sender. So my thought at that point was, there's a ghost haunting this family, or
right.
That would make no sense.
Why it was only happening basically to the Palmers, other than Cooper. Oh, and Renette is. Renette,
but it makes totally sense because it really only was happening. Well,
mostly to the family.
Yeah, they're witnessing what's happening in the family, at least at this point.
Yeah.
So when Leland takes his information to Truman and Cooper, he talks about being a boy at his grandfather's summer place, and for the next several episodes, he's really talking about being a boy. He talks about, even the 16th episode, he talks about that gum he liked was when he was a boy, and I mean, there was a lot of references to that, and I brought up at the last episode. What do you think about Mrs. Tremont's grandson maybe actually being Leland? Is that a stretch? I mean, so we know they're not real, or they're not. We don't know who to make of the Tremonts and the grandson. Joey, any thoughts on that?
That's sort of hard to talk to as well, because right now we've only seen the Tremonts that once.
Yeah, and then they disappear. We go there. Donna goes there, and they're
not there anymore.
Such little information,
All right, let's revisit that then.
I'll have more to say on that later.
Okay, maybe when we get to a future episodes, we'll talk about that. That's fair. What else do I want to talk about here? So,
stuff, that I think connects them for sure.
So I go to episode 11. The episode starts with a very extreme close-up of the wall tile and this haunting sound of daddy, daddy, screaming sound of Laura. And then we pan out and we see that it's Leland being interrogated by Truman about the whole thing. But originally I would have read that as he's still feeling the pain of the loss of his daughter.
Yeah.
But what do you think now, Joel, with the idea that we know he's the killer?
That's another interesting example of people just almost intuitively being on the same page, because although Mark Frost co-wrote that episode, that the director came up with that, Todd Holland image. I think Reflection says that.
Yeah.
So, and he obviously wasn't told, because he didn't need to know. And I think he actually says in Reflections that Frost and Lynch kind of looked at each other, or Frost or whoever looked at him and was like, wow, okay, made him change some of the audio. Well, we don't quite want this. It was almost like he was getting too close.
Yeah.
So,
and there was some screaming sounds too.
That's in that. It's amazing to me in a way, looking back on it, and I guess it's just the kind of, and it's perfect for the theme of Twin Peaks, but the kind of not wanting to know. Kind of amazing that I watched it and was still as surprised as I was when Leland saw Bob in the mirror, because they're really building up to it all through the early season 2, and yet the only people I've ever seen pick up on it were the alt TV people, the Usenet group. When they were talking, when I went back and looked at the archives, I would say at least half of them, at least of the ones I don't think I read them all, but of the ones I saw, probably a majority were on to the fact that it was Leland. And I think a big part of that was reading the diary.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's funny. So, I mean, I don't know if I've shared or not, but I didn't pick up on it. I mean, I read the diary. Everything I get my hands on. I didn't have access in 1990 to the internet. So, but I mean, anything I picked. I mean, I got newspapers, magazines, everything I could get. But I definitely was in shock when I learned. I was also 15. I don't know if that would make a difference. That I had no idea that it would be the father.
Yeah, you wouldn't want to think it would be the
yeah.
father. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I was 24 and I didn't want to. I was like, that's why I'm saying I think I suspected it on some level, but was kind of like, nah. And I think that's the main reason Twin Peaks fools people still.
Yeah. You don't want to believe. You don't want.
No,
Yeah.
It doesn't. It doesn't seem like it's that dark. It seems like it's a dark show, but it knows where to draw the line. And there's actually a quote Lynch gave in, I think, New York Times Magazine or something before the show came out, and talking about pulling the letter from under Laura's fingernail, and he says, there's a line, and you have to go right up to it, but you can't go over it. And, the fingernail thing kind of straddles that line.
Yeah. So
it's like, somehow I guess because he was kind of angry, it's like, you have to reveal it. He's like, well, fine, we're going to go all the way then. It's just not just the reveal that it's her father, but the way it's executed with, like, the scene where it's just 3 minutes of him, like, punching Maddie, which I have no idea how that ended up on ABC. Like,
yeah.
I'm glad it's there because it's a great episode. But if my job was to be like an ABC censor in the early '90s, there's no way I would have like passed that. That's just insane that was on TV.
Totally, and
it's crazy.
Yeah, you don't hear much about this too. I'm sorry, Joel.
That's the biggest. I was just going to say, I think that's the biggest surprise of that episode and why it's so surprising. Because Twin Peaks sort of winks at you for about 14 episodes, and it says, we're going to be dark, but we're not going to be too dark. We're going to be violent, but not too violent. We're going to sort of toe that line, but we know not to go over it. And it just runs over it. And I know both Lynch and Frost, came up with it, but that right there is that's David Lynch, where he sets up boundaries, and it seems like he's going to respect those, and then he crosses it, and that's why his work is so fascinating.
Yeah.
That's why people get so angry.
Right.
And not just in terms of content, but in terms of understanding the narrative. Like, Mulholland Drive is a good example. It seems to be one thing for an hour and 45 minutes, totally reverses itself. And people get angry, and they got really angry at 2 weeks, even before that reveal happened. Because even as early as the season 2 premiere, he was already starting to go over that line of what thought was, going to be within bounds for that show. So that's David Lynch, and that's why I think the show transcends just being a great entertaining show and actually becomes a work of art, because he's willing to sort of cross the boundaries that you're almost not supposed to cross, and he just goes there anyways. He forces you to. So I think if Twin Peaks started as this dark-sordid, like, Sopranos, Wire-esque show from the very beginning, and it's dark, but it doesn't, it's definitely not in that territory.
Yeah.
If it was like that from the very beginning, I think coming out with, like, the father did it, and, there's this implied incest, it would be like, oh, wow, but you'd be cushioned for it, because you were kind of expecting something. To lure you in with this, like, sort of seductive, entertaining show that balances comedy and darkness and kind of makes you feel good after you watch it, even though it's got all this dark stuff. To lure you in with that and then wham you with the revelation that it's Leland and the murder of Maddie that's like a very subversive thing to do,
Yeah.
And that's why Twin Peaks kind of floundered when it did, but I also think it's why it lasted in the long run.
I agree. So it's starting to get late, but I want to see if we can cover maybe a few more episodes here.
Sure, yeah.
On episode 13, I mean, we already covered on episode 13 the whole white fur that Leland took it, and then it.
Yes.
Which
I caught on right away.
Well, Brian said. Well, Brian still was thinking Ben was the murderer, but at the time he was like, "Why is Leland putting fur in his pocket?"
Yeah.
It definitely, yeah. But then the thing that was interesting in this episode was Leland was singing "Getting to Know You," and I remember you being very intrigued by this and thinking, I thought maybe you knew, Brian, that it was Leland.
Yeah, I thought the song was telling, getting to know you, getting to know
But you thought it
me.
was Ben? Because Ben was singing with Leland, too. Did you still think Ben was talking about getting to know him?
Well, I mean, I still thought it was Ben, but with Leland singing it, I thought maybe he was singing like he knew it was Ben or something. At that moment, that's the only thing I could think of. But
So, Brian, did you think Bob was possessing Ben, and there would be the stuff you see with Leland, but with Ben, like us taking over? Or how did you think Bob would be resolved if Ben was the killer?
Well, yeah, that's a good question because at the time, I was like, okay, Jacques was there and Leo, and then I thought Bob maybe was something that killed them afterwards, and then that Ben Horn, because he had the gentleman club in Canada.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe he was involved. So that.
But I feel like I don't remember what episode now that One Armed Man had without chemicals he points. I feel like that's when you kind of put it together that there was a host that there was a host, and then that there must have been a spirit. And Bob, at one point you were thinking Mike was the host of Bob.
Yes, I did think that
you
too.
You started connecting it there, so I don't know if
I also thought that what's his name, Harold could have been a host to something.
Yeah.
Because I kept saying his alibi was, well, he can't leave the house. So I thought, would he leave the house and not know it? And I thought maybe there was something up with Harold that he could have been the host to something. But I was like, well, the alibi is he can't leave the house.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I knew Bob was some sort of ghost or some sort of spirit. And the owl thing, when they showed the owl on his face, I was like, the owl is connected to him. And yeah, you know what? I was building the pieces, but because of those 2 episodes really pushed me to think it was Ben Horn, I kind of pushed everything aside and was more focused on Ben. And I knew these other things were happening, but I felt because the show had so much going on that it wasn't really connected to her death, So,
well, what did you think? Why did you think they showed Bob killing her though in that flashback?
See, I thought that Bob was a real person.
Yeah.
And I thought Bob really
like helped Ben or something.
Yeah, I thought Bob was
like the murders.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, originally, I know you said, "Oh, I can look at the internet now." That was a season premiere of the second season. He's like, "Oh, I can look at the internet now because I know who killed Laura Palmer." And it's like, "Don't look at the internet."
I thought Bob that
was the reveal.
Yeah, I thought Bob killed Laura in the train yard. But that was Bob.
And someone hired him to do it or something?
Yeah, he was just on his own. He was on his own, and you had Jacques and Laura and the other girl, Renette, and they were all doing stuff, and then they got drugged out, and Bob was this killer. Or maybe he was a ghost figure or something.
What do you think about the episode, right, Killer's Reveal, though, where Mike says Bob has been his host for 40 years and all of that stuff? Did you think the guy in the jeans jacket was Bob's host? I don't know, I'm trying to put it. What did you make of that possession angle when in combination with Ben having done it?
Oh.
At the point where you kind of knew, because I think by episode 13 it's pretty clear Bob is not a
real person.
Right.
But did you have any sort of... I'm just always intrigued because I think because I knew he was going to kill Maddie, when they started leading you to Ben in that episode, I was like, red herring,
Yeah.
If I hadn't known that, I'm wondering how I would have reconciled that with it being Bob. Would I have just assumed Ben is Bob's host the way Leland...
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's how I would...
The one-armed man does point at him in the Great Northern for whatever reason.
Yes, that scene, that's what made me think that Bob was possessed, or Ben was possessed with Bob and connected with the murder because he freaked out. But come to find out, it's only because they hung around each other that kind of rubbed off.
I never quite explain it.
Yeah. It was definitely a red herring, but for me, first timer, I was like, it's Ben Horn because he freaked out in the log. To me, that's why I was like, it's Ben Horn.
Right.
It's Ben Horn.
Yeah, I mean, it just seemed to confirm your belief that it was Ben. So, yeah, Getting to Know You, I love that song just because it's really like Bob's getting to know Leland or something like that. That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
So, yeah, let's see. Episode 4, well, before I get to episode 14, do we want to talk about the owl real quick? I mean, the idea of like, so there's a part where the one-armed man is in the Great Northern in his room. He knocks out the police officer, and then they pan to the window and he's gone. I always interpreted that as he turned into an owl and flew away. What is your thoughts, Joel?
I don't know, because I don't think the human hosts can transform.
Ah.
The spirits can, but I think if they do, they would leave the body behind.
Okay.
So I don't think the physical body of a one-armed man. That's just my take.
No, I get it. Yeah, that makes sense.
I don't think they do that kind of, like, all of the spiritual stuff in Twin Peaks seems like it's happening on like an almost like a hidden, like, metaphysical level, you know. And even if they're entering physical spaces, it's like they're going through a portal into another dimension, not like. I don't know.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying.
I guess that gets into stuff that happens later.
Yeah.
About it, but no, I find it hard to believe that the human hosts could turn into something else. I think the spirit would have to leave them, just like Bob leaves Leland in the jail cell.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense too. So, I mean, there's not much more I have. Episode 14, Cooper does read some of Laura's diary, and we learn that Bob abused and molested her, and that Bob is referred to as a friend of her father and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Which I guess you could think that you could, if she doesn't want to believe that, maybe she doesn't want to believe it's her father, she could think of it as a friend of his father. And
and maybe because she says Bob, she mentions Bob in the diary, so Leland must come out and say to her, I'm not your dad, I'm Bob. I mean, for her to know Bob's name, that's disturbing.
Yeah.
You know? Like, it's just...
Jennifer Lynch in the Andy Burke book, Wrapped in Plastic, that came out this year, he's got some good interviews with Jennifer, or it's quotes from Jennifer Lynch, who he interviewed. And she says, I wish I had it in front of me, but she basically says, the idea of Bob was like a master stroke and a shame, because for her it obscured people. Like, to her, the interesting dramatic idea was that Bob was a construct between Laura and her father, so that both of them kind of saw him and used them to obscure what was going on. It's almost like a shared secret kind of thing.
Yeah.
That sort of took on a life of its own. And so she was kind of like, well, there's that whole quote in episode 16 where Cooper says, Truman says, geez, it's hard to believe that there's this spirit in the woods. And Cooper says, well, is it any easier to believe, a man would rape and murder his own daughter?
Right.
And he goes, oh, no, I guess not.
No, I don't know.
Yeah, that...
kind of saying she felt like it was like a thing where for the network it was just easy to say he's an evil demon and kind of obscure that aspect. Writing the diary, the interesting dramatic angle was that Bob was like a mutual construct.
Yeah. I can see that.
That's what we talked about.
In the last episode.
The last episode. That's what I really that's where that episode really gives you that, like, multiple forks in the road. You're like, what was it a spiritual thing? Was it just he was a weak man? He was host to doing something evil, and he used the Bob thing as just an excuse. That was his mask, but truly, it really was Leland just doing a horrible thing. And it's almost like he took that Jekyll Mr. Hyde thing, like it was him all along, but doing a bad thing. So to repress that, he named it Bob.
Right, and if you went to episode 16, where Leland's dying, he says he opened me and I invited him and he came inside me, and when he's inside me I didn't know, but like some of that conversation, it's disturbing to think that maybe he's really talking about being abused as a child, that he was really talking about maybe he was molested as a child. I mean, if you don't take it as a spirit entering in him, maybe it's talking about these horrible acts that could have happened to him, and it's repeating the cycle of something happened to him and he's now doing it to his own daughter. It's like a metaphor for that idea. It's funny, actually, I was just reading on the Douglas site right before you guys called. I was on that way. It's a Twin Peaks commentary website. Don't go there, Brian, yet.
Okay, I won't.
And when you're done, you'll like it.
Excellent.
But there was actually somebody posting about that idea of the cycle of abuse, and they were actually saying, this is interesting, studies show that it isn't as existent as people think.
this idea that you abused and then abused and you become an abuser. But it is like a dramatic trope, sort of. And this is kind of their way of representing that. That idea that, because Leland was abused as a kid, now he's going to abuse his daughter. And Laura is faced with the same decision, and she tells him, no, you have to kill me. Now, the interesting thing about that, and I covered this a little in the video on the Killer's Reveal, is Mark Frost wrote a lot of Hill Street Blues. He was brought on as a writer in, I think, the third season, and he actually pretty much ran, I want to say, the fourth season of it.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, most of the episodes, you have to pay like $150 for the box set to see them. So I was only able to see the first 3 that he wrote. But it was amazing because they all had links to Twin Peaks, and 2 of them actually dealt directly with abuse and the cycle of abuse and the cover-up. The first one he did is about a woman who gives away her baby, and the police are trying to figure out why she did it. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
I can, yep.
Okay, good. So they're trying to figure out why she did it, and she says, I didn't want to start hitting it like my mother hit me, because when they come to her house, her mother's like beating her, and she's, bruises on her and stuff. And then just off screen, the disturbing thing about it is the actress who played that part was murdered by her boyfriend or ex-boyfriend like 2 or 3 days later.
Wow, unbelievable.
That is
Actually,
crazy.
the bruises on her face in the show were real because he had beaten her like the day. So it was like this awful thing. And the very next episode, I don't know what their turnaround cycle was. I would imagine it was a couple months, but Frost didn't write again for the show for a couple months. When he came back, his very next script was about a woman whose boyfriend is like stalking her and abusing her, and she tries to go to the court, and they won't
do anything about it, really.
They won't do anything about it, and the guy ends up killing her.
Wow.
So I always kind of thought, I was like, wow, that's amazing, and it kind of shows his take on that domestic abuse and the cycle of abuse and society looking the other way.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times people talk about Lynch's links to it, and he does have a lot too, because all films kind of have that family violence in them, and the sexual exploitation and Blue Velvet and Elephant Man even. There's suggestions of that and all of that. But there's clearly, it's something that Frost had dealt with before in his work too. And you can kind of see his view on it coming out in that a little bit in Twin Peaks, I think. So that's kind of an interesting perspective, and I only was able to find it because those 3 episodes were online, but it seems like, unfortunately, we've talked about this before, how Frost kind of gets overlooked sometimes.
True.
And I feel like there's a gold mine out there if people, are willing to invest in the box set, or if they finally release it on Netflix or something, to watch his work on Hill Street Blues, because I have a feeling that that's kind of a Rosetta Stone to reveal a lot of his themes and takes, even though it was somebody else's show technically.
Yeah.
I mean, he was still at a certain point. He was like the Harley Payton of that show at a certain point, where he was writing the majority of episodes and kind of handling it, the story arcs and stuff like that. So I feel like that could be very revealing. But yeah, in terms of that specific episode, I think that tells you a lot about how he sees that that issue like working itself out over time. And so I definitely think that idea was at work there.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Supernatural stuff.
Yeah.
Well, I think we should probably wrap up pretty soon, but do we have anything else we want to share about the killer, about Leland?
I'm happy I finally know. And we could talk about it. But now I feel like there's more mystery in the last half of this season. So.
Yeah. And I just keep telling you, it gets really. I think the last episode is amazing, and it makes it. Yeah, it really carries the show for the next 25 years. For people that we still love it because of that. I think. Yeah. But well, I want to end the show.
Last episode. I was just gonna say the last episode is my favorite of the whole series.
Yeah.
The last one.
It's pretty good stuff.
I mean, this one was my favorite, Joel. I saw this one, and right now. This episode 16 was my favorite so far.
Oh, good. Actually, I wanted to talk. So the one where Leland dies.
Yeah.
Yeah. 16.
Really like that. Okay, that's interesting because when I first saw it, there are things I like about it now, but I was really disappointed because I felt like Cooper solved it like too easily almost. It was like handed. Like, what was your take? I know you guys just covered this, so
Yeah.
repeat anything. You just told your listeners, but like, what was it about it that worked for you in terms of resolving the mystery?
For me, I almost felt like episode 14, 15, 16. For me, I almost feel like Cooper didn't get it as easily, like, because it took 3 episodes where he just seemed
That's true.
he seemed confused. He seemed not Cooper-like. He seemed almost kind of like almost like downtrodden, like kind of like I'm confused.
Defeated and almost defeated. And basically let Truman say, "Okay, you do your thing, and we'll just follow you." And maybe Ben did kill.
Yeah,
Laura.
and the giant, when the giant comes back, huh?
He's off his game.
Yeah. And honestly, the episode when Maddie's killed and Cooper's in the roadhouse, and I almost think he thinks he's gonna figure it out at that moment. And when the waiter comes over and says, "I'm sorry," it's almost like he's been defeated because the killer killed again and he was in the wrong place. And he's getting the signals, but he's not getting them where he should be. Like, they're there, but he just can't figure it out. So for me, from that episode on, it felt like him trying to figure it out. And usually he's so quick. He's like, "Hey, you have woman problems. Hey, why are you so depressed looking?" But now all of a sudden he's just kind of like lost. Like, he's not getting anything. And for me, I liked these last 3 episodes, but this episode I just liked it a lot. It was filmed cool. I liked the way it was filmed.
Tim Hunter there, right? Tim Hunter directed 16.
Yeah, it felt like a movie.
Tim Hunter.
Yeah, it felt like a movie, and it felt like it felt like Twin Peaks, but at the same time, it just felt different. You know, the way it was filmed.
It's much more fast-paced.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I felt like almost every scene is like it was intriguing, and it brought new details that I didn't know about. That we learned about. One on Mike was partnered with Bob, and they had this relationship, the Golden Circle.
Yeah,
It was a lot of cool stuff that we got out of that episode.
Yeah.
You know, the other thing I thought was interesting is that like. The writers are brilliant in that they made Leland kill somebody, and so that kind of covers you up to think, he killed somebody, and then he's willing to basically say, "I can help you with the investigation. I know Bob," which makes you think, okay, he couldn't be the killer because, and we kind of already said that, but in a way, he's not the killer because he's grieving over killing somebody else, and because he's actually helping. So they're good at misdirection. I would say that.
Yes.
Yeah, that's for sure.
So I think we'll wrap it up, and I want to end the show on Joel on your journey through Twin Peaks. Just a clip of it, which is Chapter 9, Scene of the Crime, where you kind of and you've talked a little bit about it in this episode, but it's really briefly about the reveal of the murder of Laura Palmer. So and can you share anything else? What do you? I don't know if we did last time you were on. If you could share more about your website, you do even more than just Twin Peaks on your website.
Yeah, it's called Lost in the Movies. The address is thedancingimage.blogspot.com. And it's a movie blog. I've been running it for 7 years now. It's got a lot of videos, a lot of visual stuff. And actually, I just started a Tumblr where I'm sharing all the images that I've built up over the years. So if you missed them the first time, you can kind of check that out. But I would encourage anybody who goes to it, check out the archives, because I think, for me, one of the big things about blogging is I always try to tell people, like, don't necessarily just, if you're into whatever's up on the top of the page, start there. But there's so much history there. You can go, I set up directories, so if you want to look for, what did you think of Blue Velvet, or what did you think of, Schindler's List, or I don't know, whatever movie there is.
Yeah.
You can kind of look it up and see, and I've got picture gallery. So I tried to make it as interactive an experience as I could for people. So it's not just like, hey, here's the latest post, but like actually something you can explore,
Cool.
And that's kind of my fun. I call it like my gardening. Some people get home from work and they do they have a little rake and they plant their flowers and do their garden. This is kind of like my online garden of movie paraphernalia. Or movie. I shouldn't say that because there's a lot of like criticism and stuff on there too, and reviews and but it's sort of a multimedia thing. And then, of course, the big thing for the listeners is Journey Through Twin Peaks, the video series I did, where it's 28 chapters, chronological, covering a pilot through the film, and actually looking at it as it develops both on screen and behind the scenes, and kind of seeing how those two elements interact. And the funny thing is, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you. Yep, we're listening.
Okay. The funny thing is, right now you're at a little past the halfway point. The actual literal halfway point of the show is the reveal of the killer. Cooper looks up, Julie Cruz finishes singing, curtains fade in on him. Bam! That's literally like ground zero of the. Well, for the most part. Otherwise, not so much, but episode count it is. But the funny thing is, when I was making the series, a lot like the later parts, talking about season 2 and the film, are actually a lot longer than the first part. So I think when we get to Leland's killing Maddie, it's only about an hour into the it's a 4-hour, if you watch it all together, a 4-hour series. So kind of what I'm getting at and what I wanted to sort of set up for Brian is there's some rough seas ahead.
Yeah. I
will say that the show, it could have ended with Maddie dying, even before Leland's captured. I think that's almost like a whole other thing. But it could have ended with Cooper realizing he didn't catch Killen. It would be this powerful, tight, dramatic little mini-series.
Yeah.
But a lot of the stuff that keeps Twin Peaks alive and growing and that makes it possible for it to come back is in the back half of the show. It's not always handled great. It's not always... And Lynch, himself, it's unfortunately gone most of the time.
Yeah.
But all of these seeds are planted, which blossom in the final episode and in the film, and make it possible for Twin Peaks to be not just this tight little murder investigation, quirky soap opera, but this sort of sprawling mythology with all these tangents, but that all relate back to this central core of like Laura Palmer and her life, and her trauma and the sort of the spiritual stakes behind that. So that's all I'm going to say about that.
Cool.
I think it'll be interesting to hear how you react to this stuff, but keep in mind, even when, sometimes things get dire, and I'll just say 2 words, Evelyn Marsh. But, even when things get sort of dire, there is a bigger picture at play, and it'll eventually, I think, sort of come clear.
Cool. I'm excited for the second half.
Yeah, it's something else. Yeah. And so Joel, am I right that you still have some plans for your blog related to Twin Peaks as we get closer to maybe the new season coming out?
Yeah, once a month I put something up Twin Peaks related, at least once a month, sometimes more. And I've got a couple things upcoming. I think, this interview for one, obviously, but also supposedly Welcome to Twin Peaks I'm going to have a guest post. I submitted it to him, so he'll put it up at some point. Not sure when, but they got a lot of news coming now from North Bend and Snoqualmie, so it might be a little while, but which is exciting as hell, by the way. I don't know if you guys are looking at pictures or keeping yourself free from that.
I saw pictures.
Yeah, we're seeing pictures.
Yep.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Like, I'm tempted to could I just go to Seattle for a few days? And,
I know.
It's so cool, It just seems like such a cool place to be right now, and they're sharing the news and stuff. So it's an exciting time to be a Twin Peaks fan.
Yeah, totally.
As far as my stuff goes, once a month. And then when the show is about to come back, I'll do a full-on episode guide where I'm just both offering new insights and collecting all of my previous work on that particular episode. So pulling out chunks of videos of previous posts where I talk about it and making almost like I did a little episode guide in the past where I just wrote a review, and this will be like an episode guide on steroids. It'll be appearances of cherry pie in the episode, and does this tie in? And it'll be totally spoiler free too. I'll probably do a separate post that has spoilers, but
cool.
So I don't know why anyone listening to this podcast, would need a spoiler free episode guide, but if they have friends who are going to start it, they can direct them there.
That's true.
Awesome. I can't wait to check it out. So I hope we'll definitely have you on again soon. I keep thinking, I don't know if we want to do it every 7 or so roughly, because it seems like we'll at least one the episode.
I'm really gratified that you want to have me on, and it's great talking about it with you. So whatever works for you guys, I'm game for.
Yeah,
Cool,
I mean, you bring a
cool.
lot of insight and
Yeah.
knowledge, and I love your video essays on Journey Through Twin Peaks. They're amazing. You guys should check it out. We have the link in the
show notes.
and
Yep.
stuff. So yeah, we should wrap this up. We should give our. Do you have anything else to say, Joel, before we wrap this up? I think you gave your spiel and.
No. I thought I've said plenty.
Oh, you have said plenty, and we really appreciate your time.
Yes,
thank you for
thank
being
you.
on the show. And yeah, so when we end this, we'll end it with a little piece of Chapter 9, Scene of the Crime, Joel's journey through Twin Peaks. But why don't we say, how can people reach us?
TwinPeaksUnwrapped@gmail.com. Please email comments, questions, or anything. And you can follow us on Twitter, Twin Peaks Unwrapped. And like us on Facebook, Twin Peaks Unwrapped. And subscribe to us on iTunes. It's free. Rate us and give us a nice review. And that's it.
Cool.
I think we're out of here.
We're out of here. Thank you, Joel.
Thank you, Joel.
Thank you.
Few viewers are truly surprised when Leland Palmer is revealed as Bob's host, and implicitly, the killer of his own daughter. And yet few viewers would predict this turn of events ahead of time. It's a truth that is generally suspected, but suppressed. This revelation feels like a shock for several reasons. First, Leland is one of the show's most enjoyable characters. Especially since his white-haired, singing and dancing turn in the Season 2 premiere, he's been one of the highlights of recent episodes. Ray Wise's verve is contagious. If Leland is the killer, it most likely means he will depart the cast, and we'll miss him. More fundamentally, we like Leland, and we want to keep liking him. Watching our friend turn into a maniacal serial killer before our eyes is a punch in the gut. Second, although the show has already confirmed the existence of the supernatural, this shot mixes the earthly and unearthly realms in disorienting fashion. Are we looking at the repressed side of Leland's personality, or a true demonic spirit? Lynch will provide no answers, but his imagery carries its own suggestive charge. We can't help but feel that Leland and Bob are intertwined, even if we wish to clearly separate the two. Third, and perhaps most importantly, we recognize something profoundly uncomfortable. If Leland sees Bob in the mirror, it follows that he was the third man in the woods, that he was solely responsible for the assault on Laura and Renette, and that he is the mysterious figure mentioned in Laura's diary.
He was a threatening presence in her life from early adolescence. There are intimations of abuse and molestation on a regular basis.
Whether or not he is possessed by Bob, whether or not he controls his own body, this ugly fact remains. Laura Palmer's dark secret, the hidden center of Twin Peaks, is, and always was,